There are moments when someone who once walked the palace halls said something so blunt, so unfiltered, that it slices through years of silence and forces everyone to stop and listen. This is one of those moments, not because it came from a reporter or an outsider, but because it came from someone who actually lived inside those private rooms, witnessed the real dynamics, and saw the people behind the titles long before the world questioned them. What she revealed about Andrew wasn't gossip, it wasn't speculation. It was a raw, first-hand impression that instantly reignited conversations the palace hoped had finally quieted. And the deeper you go into what she said, the more you understand why her words landed like a blow at the worst possible time for him. But here's the real reason you'll want to watch this video to the end. Her comments didn't just expose her personal opinion, they opened a window into the hidden emotional structure of royal life, revealing contradictions, pressures, and overlooked truths that most people never hear about. By the time we reach the final point, you'll see why this single interview has shifted the conversation in a way no headline ever could. If you enjoy uncovering the real stories behind the royal facade, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Susannah Constantine wasn't just another commentator looking in from the outside. For 6 years, she dated David Armstrong Jones, placing her inside the quiet corners of royal life where outsiders never go. She wasn't guessing about the atmosphere or the personalities. She observed them directly, in real time, without cameras, reporters, or formalities shaping what she saw. That proximity is what gives her voice unusual weight. She attended private dinners, watched family interactions unfold naturally, and saw the difference between the polished public image and the unguarded moments behind it. So when she finally spoke about her impressions, people listened, not because she wanted attention, but because she actually lived through the world most only imagine. And once she began describing Andrew, her tone made it clear that her comments weren't vague memories. They came from specific impressions and a level of familiarity that few are willing to share publicly. But nothing prepared anyone for what she said next. When Susanna finally spoke about Andrew, she didn't soften her words or hide behind polite phrasing. She described him in terms that landed with immediate force: ignorant, entitled, and remarkably unaware. These weren't exaggerated claims or dramatic storytelling. They were her personal impressions formed over years of quiet observation, long before his name became linked to public controversy. What struck listeners most was the confidence with which she spoke. She said he carried himself as if the world owed him a favor, moving through life with a level of self-importance that felt completely detached from reality. And when she questioned how he ever qualified for a helicopter license, based on her own family's experience in the forces, it didn't come off as an insult. It came off as genuine astonishment from someone who couldn't reconcile the difficulty of the role with the man she remembered. Her comments didn't introduce new allegations or claims. Instead, they echoed the uneasy perceptions many people had been forming on their own for years. And because her remarks came from real proximity rather than speculation, they hit with a precision that no tabloid could ever match. But just as the conversation seemed to settle into pure criticism, she shifted, offering an insight no one expected. Instead of stopping at criticism, Susanna added a layer that caught listeners off guard. She acknowledged that Andrew's behavior didn't appear out of nowhere. It came from the unique pressures tied to his position growing up. Being the spare is often portrayed as glamorous, but inside royal life, it creates a strange kind of emptiness. You're surrounded by privilege, yet you don't have a clear path of your own. Every decision, every expectation, every comparison circles back to the one sibling destined to lead, while your role remains undefined. Susanna suggested that this dynamic can leave someone directionless, drifting between duty and resentment, unable to build a true identity beyond the shadow of the heir. And while her insight didn't excuse the choices Andrew made as an adult, it did highlight a truth most people overlook. The monarchy offers extraordinary comfort, but it doesn't offer emotional structure. The system shapes personality as much as it shapes responsibility. It was a rare moment of nuance, one that made her earlier comments even more striking. Because despite understanding the environment he came from, her overall view of him didn't soften. In fact, it only underscored how far his reputation has fallen. Long before Susanna spoke, Andrew's public standing had been unraveling. Over the last decade, his image has shifted from a familiar royal figure to someone surrounded by scrutiny and criticism. His official roles were suspended, honours returned, and his presence within the family's public duties faded almost overnight. Each development added another layer to a story already weighed down by past associations and decisions that continue to spark debate. When Susanna shared her impressions, they didn't create a new controversy, they reinforced an ongoing decline. Her remarks aligned with what many people had been feeling for years, turning private doubts into public conversation. And because her perspective came from first-hand experience rather than speculation, it hit a part of the narrative that was already fragile. Every comment, every resurfaced detail, every insider observation adds to a portrait that feels increasingly difficult to repair. And just when her criticism seemed absolute, she introduced a contrast that reshaped the conversation entirely. Despite her harsh assessment of Andrew, Susanna shifted tone the moment his daughters entered the conversation. She described Beatrice and Eugenie as sensible, kind, and genuinely grounded, traits that stand in sharp contrast to the reputation surrounding their father. Her praise felt sincere, not strategic, and it highlighted a side of the family that rarely makes headlines. What made her words even more striking was the implication behind them. If the daughters grew into calm, thoughtful adults, then there must have been moments of real care in their upbringing. It suggested that behind the public turmoil, their parents managed to give them something stable enough to rise above the noise. This contrast between father and daughters softened the narrative just enough to show the complexity within the family. And it raised a larger question, one that goes far beyond personal behavior and into the heart of the institution itself. Susanna's comments didn't just spark judgment about one man, they brought attention to something deeper inside the royal system. Her remarks revived questions the public has been asking for years. Why do consequences seem inconsistent? How does hierarchy shape behavior? And how much of a royal's attitude is personal choice, and how much is the result of a structure built to shield, elevate, and isolate? Every insider comment forces people to look beyond the surface. It reveals that titles may define responsibility, but they don't guarantee accountability. It also shows how easily the line between privilege and purpose can blur, creating personalities that struggle once real challenges appear. Her interview didn't solve these questions, it amplified them, and it reminded viewers that when someone from inside the circle speaks, they expose cracks that polished public statements can't hide. Those cracks set the stage for the final, unavoidable conclusion. Susannah Constantine's remarks didn't rely on rumours or headlines. They were shaped by her own experiences, formed long before the public debate began, and spoken with a confidence that made people pause. Her perspective echoed what many had quietly suspected, adding a human layer to a story that has already transformed Andrew's public image. And at the same time, her praise for Beatrice and Eugenie reminded everyone that even inside the most scrutinized families, the truth is rarely one-dimensional. In the end, her interview revealed more than a personal opinion. It exposed the tension between privilege and accountability and the emotional gaps inside a system that was never designed to guide its members through real-world consequences. It showed how quickly reputations can shift and how powerful an insider's voice can be when it finally breaks the silence. If you want to dive deeper into the stories shaping the modern monarchy, make sure you subscribe so you never miss what comes next.